You are listening to the Jam Price Show all about movies, and today my guest is award-winning producer, director, Vanessa Hope. And we're going to be talking about a very timely, valuable uh, documentary that she has directed and produced, and that documentary is Invisible Nation. Welcome to the show, Vanessa.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. This is, as I said, very timely and valuable. So our listeners know what this film is about. Why don't you give a brief synopsis of what Invisible Nation is all about?
Invisible Nation tells the story of Taiwan during their first female president, Tsai Ing-wen's presidency, and how Taiwan became a democracy transitioning out of a dictatorship, and why they matter so much today, especially in this world, and how much they're under threat from China. And we should know their story so that they don't remain invisible, so that they can't be invaded without the international community standing up and trying to stop it.
Beautiful. You're right. It does. This is this is a level. This is a You've done other films around in China and Asia and other films in the past. So talk a little bit about what your connection is and why you feel so strongly about uh, that part of the world, and particularly Taiwan.
My connection to Taiwan really developed strongly the year that I lived there, 1995, 96, as a student, was my first time there. And it was their first direct presidential elections. So it was the year they really became a democracy. And China was firing missiles at us on the island. And I really was baffled and didn't understand what was going on and felt I needed to. So that changed my life that year. And I then went to work in foreign policy at the Council on Foreign Relations, especially to learn what was the US fingerprints on the situation. And then I stuck with it because the stories were so fascinating of international relations and diplomacy. So I made a film during President Obama's presidency about the US-China relationship that only touched on Taiwan a little bit in terms of how the US sells arms to Taiwan, and that upsets China. So I knew after I finished that film, which came out really 2016, 2015, that Taiwan deserved its own story and they might elect their first female president. So in January 2016, I joined a delegation to monitor that their elections were free and fair, so I could be there and work with a local crew and film. And we were in the crowd when President Tsai won for the first time, and it was so exciting and historic and powerful. And I just thought, wow, I mean, to follow a first female president of a Democratic Progressive Party, it would be really unprecedented and meaningful, and an especially significant window into Taiwan's story. And then we got started, and I've learned a ton since then.
So you actually started filming this, what, 8 years ago? Over 8 years ago?
Yeah.
And so did you know at that time it was going to take that many years for it to
No,
finally
and
come to fruition?
no, could not have. Maybe I should have anticipated the time frame, because one thing I learned on the first film was that when you have a politician in a film, in the first film, it was Obama's US ambassador to China, John Huntsman, chose to run for president against Obama in 2012, which might have been why Obama was sending him to China in the first place, to stop him running, but it didn't stop him. And, there was pressure to try to come out before his run and or impact his run. And if you're not making a campaign film, which I was never setting out to do, this film with President Tsai is the second American documentary ever with a sitting head of state. So when you have a sitting head of state, you should know that they might run for a second term, and you might be in this for more than one term of office, because it's a big deal to have that kind of access and to follow those developments over time. And I was all in, committed. So once President Tsai decided to run again in 2020, we then realized it was going to be a full 2-term kind of story.
And so how long did you stay in Taiwan when you were filming each time?
Each time varied. When we got the green light, which was April of 2017, after we had written a proposal, submitted it to President Tsai's office, and waited the required 6 months, they basically said, come back in 2 weeks. And they opened her schedule in May for 5 weeks into the beginning of June. And nobody knew was that, how much we would have, whether that would be a movie, what else would come. But every year I would go back at a different time of year for a different length of time. Sometimes it was 2 weeks, sometimes it was another month. And then during COVID 2021, no one could go, everything was restricted. And the longest period I spent was from July of 2022 through February of 2023. And that was excellent because our edit team, who are largely Taiwanese and certainly Taiwan based, were there, and they had a screening room. So I was still shooting, but we were editing in Taipei, and we were screening for local people of all different backgrounds and kind of getting to know the community in a new way that felt really important for the story.
Oh, it really is. You've laid this out so beautifully. You really have. It just follows. It's very, yeah, that's very fascinating, but you've laid it out in a very wonderful way. So we get the history of Taiwan. And that's really what's very important, because I don't know how many Americans are really that familiar with Taiwan and how important it is. And this film must be seen. It really is such an important film, and it's timely right now with everything that's going on in the world. So let's talk about that a little bit, and how, here it is. You started this in 2017 or 2016, and now here we are in 2024, and the significance of this film is more important now than perhaps when you first started it.
Yes, absolutely true. And to your first point, I'm now promoting the film because we're coming out in theaters at the Quad in New York Friday night, and for a week. It's very exciting.
Yes.
I'm telling people I meet in New York about the film, and often, today I said, I made this film about Taiwan, and this woman said, oh, I just bought some bags from there. And she showed me a picture, and then she said, you said Thailand, right? And I was like, no, but don't worry, because everyone makes that mistake. Taiwan is still confused with Thailand, and no one should feel embarrassed or ashamed about that. It is a deliberate attempt on the part of China to obscure Taiwan's true story so that they can claim it as their own and say it's a part of China. So people don't even realize it's a country to tell a story about. And that is part of why the history is so critical, because it's Taiwan's history. And what I learned starting in 2016, when the screens behind President Tsai were blaring, "We are Taiwanese," was how important the sense of Taiwanese identity is to people who live there. And it really came about through their process of democratization, which began in full in 1996, the other major year I was there. So today, I would say what happened, my personal interest began with a first female president of a Democratic Progressive Party. What does that look like? And unfortunately, I couldn't get that many people interested in the subject in that way. I knew the World War III stakes of the story from 1995, 96, and then working in foreign policy. I didn't want to overemphasize that, and instead to treat that delicately and give Taiwan and the people of Taiwan more of a voice and recognition for all of their huge accomplishments in democracy, their advancements, even under President Tsai, especially with same-sex marriage, transitional justice. But what it took globally was, unfortunately, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that to really put a spotlight on Taiwan and really draw international attention, because now people are seeing the closeness between Putin and Xi Jinping, and they're seeing how easy it is for a dictator to make a decision overnight and boom, they're invading a country and calling it their own, and they have ambitions that are far beyond their own territory, claiming other people and other territory, and ignoring facts and reality on the ground, and ignoring the wishes of people who don't want to be invaded. And so I think what's unique about this story at this time is we have a window of opportunity to wake the world up to prevent another invasion from happening. You have hot wars in Ukraine and in Israel, Gaza. No one wants any more bloodshed. Everyone understands that military is not offering the solutions people seek. It's still going to require diplomacy in those war zones, and now in Taiwan before it becomes a war zone. These are people, everyone, everywhere deserves self-determination, deserves an equal status on the world stage. And I think there's a growing awareness of that.
Yes, I think, well, this film is certainly going to shine a light on that for sure, Vanessa. And that's what I do hope you get a lot more exposure with this film, and this interview will do that too for you. But it's the way you've laid it out towards the end, it's just really scary, the sense of how you plot it through. If they take Taiwan, then then they're going to go to Japan and then down to the Philippines. I mean, that was fascinating that China could just go keep invading all of these countries, and yet what's to stop them, to be honest with you.
So that person in the film, Matthew Pottinger, who makes this point that Taiwan is kind of a linchpin for what is known as the first island chain of democracies that are right around China, is critical, because China's ambitions to turn Taiwan into a military base so it can project power into the Pacific don't end with Taiwan. And whether China is direct and clear about it or not, their actions are clear. Their intentions are, as Pottinger says in reading in Chinese, their military literature, is they want Japan to be destabilized, and the Philippines and Australia and South Korea. They don't like having democracies on their border. They do have an authoritarian system of government that's verging on totalitarian, and that is the way they prefer the countries around them to govern themselves. So it's a front line that Taiwan is at, and they have been on the front lines of this kind of authoritarian bullying for decades. And it's kind of horrific to think that they've lived with this fear. And it, should be possible. They show so much resilience in Taiwan and such willingness to stand up and fight for what they have gained themselves in their democracy. And I think all the democracies of the world should be standing together with them and saying, we support you. You can see the dictatorships, the dictators of the world, Putin, Xi Jinping, Orban, and on, they're all supporting each other, but the democracies should be supporting each other and showing we won't back down.
I agree, but in this film, you also point out how they have not been recognized as their own country. Talk a little bit about that, because that was sort of surprising.
Yeah, it's incredibly surprising, and it's why we titled the film Invisible Nation, because, for example, in the Paris Olympics coming up in end of July, Taiwan is participating under the name Chinese Taipei, which is ridiculous. There is no, Taipei is a city, and it's Taiwan's city. It's not Chinese Taipei. And once upon a time, when Taiwan was a founding member as the Republic of China under Chiang Kai-shek in the United Nations, they were diplomatically recognized by many countries, and they participated in the Olympics as Taiwan. So that story is in the film, to point out that there's no reason it has to be this way. Taiwan can return to being known as Taiwan when they participate in the Olympics. And Taiwan, under their democratic leadership, should be in the United Nations. It's absurd that China is manipulating something called UN Resolution 2758, which only applies to the China seat in the United Nations, to say, oh no, Taiwan can't be in the United Nations because it's part of us. Or they manipulate their language around the one China principle. And the US obfuscates our position by saying in our one China policy that we hear what you say, Beijing, but we don't agree with it. So we don't officially diplomatically recognize Taiwan. None of the major countries do, but we unofficially do. And the smaller countries that do have official diplomatic relations with Taiwan ensure that it does maintain a country status. It is de facto independent and it is a country. But that story needs to be told now before it's too late, because China's strategy in keeping Taiwan invisible is to be able to say, keep out to every other country in the world, these are our internal affairs, no foreign interference. Taiwan is ours to do with as we please. If we want to invade it, blockade it, or take it over, we will, and you stay out. And that's China's message. So we've got to know the truth and stand up for it.
Yes. It's just like,
It's so scary.
it
Yeah.
is scary. It is scary. You know, that they also, who didn't recognize them either. I mean, all of these,
Yeah.
it's just amazing. I know you just have President Biden briefly
Yeah.
in this, and he's asked the question, would we support Taiwan if it was invaded? And he says yes. Do you know what the Biden policy is towards Taiwan right now?
I think that relations between the United States and Taiwan have been growing closer and stronger under President Tsai's terms in office. And now I think with President Lai, that will continue. The fact that Biden said 4 times we will defend Taiwan, which is more clear than what had been our policy of strategic ambiguity, which was to not say if we will come to Taiwan's defense in order to stop Taiwan from provoking a war with China. But what's really clear is that it's China provoking the West and provoking Taiwan and changing the status quo and encircling them with military fighter jets and all the rest. And Taiwan is just seeking to defend itself, and the United States knows it. And I think Biden intends for Americans to be there. But I think the call is also to the international community, because the US can't defend Taiwan alone, and it can't get there faster than 2 weeks. So people in Taiwan need to be able to defend themselves, and people in the Asia Pacific countries need to be able to come to Taiwan's defense too, and show that we will.
And you show that in the film, that they're, doing maneuvers, military maneuvers with President Tsai there. And she said, this is not that we're declaring war on China, but we want to be prepared in case we are invaded. And of course, they need to do that because you don't know at any minute what may happen.
Yep,
So,
exactly.
well, let's talk about the phone call that then President Trump made to Taiwan and what ensued after that, because I thought that was also fascinating.
Yes, that was, I believe, a congratulatory phone call from President Tsai to President Trump that he accepted, and therefore became the first time in 40 years that the leader of Taiwan and of the United States had that kind of interaction. So it blew up into this diplomatic controversy. And whether Trump understood the meaning and significance of it, I don't know. I think he did have people on his team who did know and wanted him to take the call. And, in a very childish way, of course, he tweeted, "She called me," all caps, to kind of emphasize that it wasn't his doing. I am concerned that he is still around, and that should he get anywhere near the presidency again, not only Taiwan, but all of us will be in terrible peril.
Yes.
He compared Taiwan to the tip of his pen, and China to the Oval Office desk, famously. And I think that's how he calculates what matters and what doesn't. He likes things large and gold, and he's greedy, and don't get me started. So
That's a whole nother conversation that we can
that's a
have
whole other conversation.
after the show.
He has small hands and a really small brain. Let's get that straight. Really small brain. Sorry.
Obviously, you've met him.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, then how would the others talk about who went over to China to smooth things out after
Okay.
that? Because that was I didn't, I didn't even know he was still going and doing those kinds of things, and why and who sent him. But go on, let's talk. I'll let you talk, say who it is.
I think that Kissinger tends to deputize himself, and I think he went in his capacity as CEO of Kissinger Associates.
Let's just tell everybody it was Henry Kissinger who at 93 flew over to China to smooth out diplomatic relationships with China after that infamous phone call. So go on.
Exactly. And so you have a very frustrated, very accomplished senior diplomat from the United States, William Stanton, who's been in Taiwan for decades, and he's been a professor, and he's been head of the American Institute in Taiwan, which is a de facto embassy for the United States there, who just says that it's unfortunate how little the United States has learned over time. And I think that Kissinger, who really was like a stand-in for American foreign policy the entire time he was alive, is part of the problem, because he was never held accountable for any of his war crimes. There were no consequences. He was a huge self-promoter, and people felt that they had to bow down to him. And he never visited Taiwan, and he never cared to have American foreign policy updated to reflect reality. He's famous for the term realpolitik, but there's nothing real about his politics. He never understood the importance of women. He never understood the importance of countries being treated equally and fairly on the world stage. And he made a huge mistake in many different countries and cost many lives, and has done a lot of damage that I think the United States can undo, but has to show it will undo by prioritizing democracy in a real way, by putting our values forward and not our economic interests.
Right. Everything's always about money. Just follow the money trail,
Seriously.
Yes, it's the truth. I mean, it's goes back to all the president's men. Just follow the money.
Exactly.
And, we've had many conversations with friends about that, and saying, we don't have any really saying what's going on in our world, because it's all about the almighty dollar that's controlling absolutely everything. So if Taiwan was important to us as far as money, which it is,
Right.
in many ways, then it will have more importance to us than if it didn't. So, and Nancy Pelosi went over. I think that was pretty amazing too. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, Nancy Pelosi is brave, and she's a long time supporter of human rights and democracy. And she's, oop, that was the parrot chiming in. He likes Nancy Pelosi too. Pelosi famously visited Beijing and Tiananmen Square after the June 4th crackdown. Everyone knows that she cares about and values democracy and human rights. So for her to stand up to Beijing and fly to Taiwan when she did, and show support for President Tsai and their democracy was meaningful. And it wasn't her choice. She was invited by President Tsai, and she, I think, did a tour of Asia at that time, kind of reaffirming the closeness of our relations with all those countries in the Asia Pacific, which is very important to reinforce that community.
Yes, it is. Where have you shown this? Have you shown it to, I mean, I know you have the premiere in New York at the Quad. So anyone who's listening, please go get tickets to that. But have you shown this to any people in the government? Have you shown it to Nancy Pelosi, let's say? Have you shown it to other people that could maybe make a difference? Let's put it that way. Because this film it's a film that not only is it just an amazing documentary, but it is one that could, change and shift things. And that's why it's so important. And it's so important that it be seen.
Thank you so much for saying that. We have been feeling that impact already. I'll just quickly tell you before I talk about politicians. The American Bar Association International Law Section just invited us to screen the film. They're the establishment lawyers in the US, but internationally, and they're re-emphasizing that under international law, Taiwan is a country, and arguing that Taiwan deserves to be represented as Taiwan in international organizations, and it should be readmitted to the UN and all of that. So that's underway. When we were in Berlin, we screened at the Reichstag in the Parliament building for all of these German parliamentarians, and that was incredible, along with the de facto Taiwan ambassador to Germany. All of those embassies are very supportive, and we're looking at potential screenings for the UK Parliament, for the US Congress, for the EU Parliament, and we'll see who else may invite us. But when we played in DC with the Council on Foreign Relations and Johns Hopkins Bloomberg Center, which is a beautiful, beautiful screening room, we had Congressman Ted Lieu in the audience. Some people pronounce it Ted Lieu, but he's from California. He's great. And I believe Adam Schiff also endorses the film, and we're hoping Pelosi will watch it soon. She has a link, so we'll see.
Great. I wish you, unfortunately, our time is up. I
Okay.
can continue to talk to you more about this,
know.
and I wish you nothing but great success and hopefully, the people who really need to see it. So I wish you much
Thank you
success
so
with
much,
it.
Jan. Thank you.
Thank you, Vanessa. Lovely meeting you.
Yes, you too.
Thank you.
And the bird you've met.
And the bird was fine. We couldn't hear it.
Got one. Okay, good. Okay, good.
And it was great. It was great.
Okay.
So thank you. I met your husband. Just I don't know if
Oh, you
this
met Ted. He's down there.
is it
Yeah.
still recording? I'm on his email list.
Oh,
So I read
great.
his, Substack, and he had a special screening of To Kill a Tiger.
Oh,
And
I love that movie.
yeah, and I live in Santa Barbara, and I
Oh, great.
down and went to see it and introduced myself to him. And I said I would love to have him
Fantastic.
on the show.
Oh, great. I'm sure he would happily do it anytime.
But I got you first, which is great.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you. Thanks
beautiful
for having
inside
me.
and out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Much
Okay.
success. Well, hopefully you're in LA, right?
Normally, yeah, right now we're in New York, but we're
Oh, you're in
normally
New York.
in LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll try to maybe connect once you get back to LA for sure.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Send my best to Ted.
I
All right.
will. Okay.
Bye. Have a
Bye.
great day.